What's up, everybody? D-Man back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we're going to be doing another Godzilla Kong news roundup. That's right, in this video we will be continuing our chronological journey through the development and release of Godzilla Kong: The New Empire and its subsequent sequel by talking about events that happened in May. And today, Godzilla Kong: The New Empire becomes the highest grossing film of the MonsterVerse. How did it do it, and what does that mean for the future? Let's find out. Hey, starting off, I want to show off some artwork from the community. Like always, if you don't know, then you don't watch these. But you know who does watch these? Our first artist. This first piece is from Mr. Goji. It's not necessarily an artwork, but it is this mashup of Godzilla 2014's face and Godzilla Evolve's face. I think it is sick, showing the evolution of Godzilla. I really love that 2014 face. I think the whole 2014 design is so freaking cool, but there is an epic factor to the evolved Godzilla's face. If there's anything that I want to see retained in the next movie with Godzilla getting a new design, it's this face. I think evolved Godzilla's face is so cool with the additional spikes and how jagged it is. I think it's just really neat. So I would hope that they keep this face design for the next movie, but I'm fine changing most of the rest of the body. Mr. Goji is responsible for this next piece as well, which is a mashup of Godzilla -1 and Godzilla Evolved's face, showing the different proportions between them. I love that he's matched up the mouths. That's so freaking cool. And it makes evolved Godzilla look so classic. It like really shows the evolution of Godzilla, because obviously -1 is such a classic Godzilla design that it shows the lineage between Toho's Godzilla and America's Godzilla. I think it is so cool. I also think it'd be cool if Mr. Goji followed me on Twitter, because he clearly watches my videos, considering anytime I make a news and updates, I feel like I see him post something relating to my video the day after. So just follow me already. New Empire had a puzzle released in Japan. It was a 300-piece puzzle that, when put together, revealed the poster of Godzilla and Kong running together. Next up, the Bandai Movie Monster series Shimo got another teaser with this silhouette image, which eventually led to the poster image showing off the Bandai Movie Monster series Shimo and Scar King. Shimo looks pretty good. Actually, a lot of detail in her. She does look like she's made of cottage cheese a little bit, but on the whole, looking pretty awesome. I like the way they've done the blue on her crystals on the back. That's very cool. And Scar King looks mostly good. I think he looks mostly good, although his face looks a little odd, a little creepy. They released a bunch of images of the Scar King and Shimo. These things got all their images released. They are in the 6-inch movie monster scale. I wish they added articulation on Scar King's legs. It looks like he has none, which is a little disappointing. On the whole, looking pretty good. These things were unfortunately sold as a set that ran you $115. Why? They are in the 6-inch scale, the same size as Godzilla and Kong, who, if you buy both of them in Japan, you're spending $22. I do not understand the price jump. What a crazy leap. I'm not gonna get those ever. That's ridiculous. Playmates are $10. What the heck? This is pretty sick, and it is not that expensive. A Godzilla 2024 skeleton model kit was released. As you can see here is the model kit on display. It's showing the artwork of the skeleton and how it pieces together inside of the Godzilla. You build the Godzilla around it, and then you can paint the Godzilla. The Godzilla skeleton in the background and the artwork of the Godzilla skeleton and the design of the Godzilla skeleton was done by my friend Shinji Nishikawa. Looking fantastic, man. I love the artwork back there. I love this kit. I think it is such a neat idea. There's supposed to be one for Godzilla Evolved coming out as well, and this only ran you $51, so relatively cheap, but also you gotta remember it is unpainted. Spiral Studios revealed their Godzilla 2019 vinyl assembly kit. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I think it means that it's unpainted, and I also think it means that it probably comes in pieces that you have to put together, but it looks fantastic. Incredible sculpt, incredible details. Spiral Studios always kills it, and because it's an assembly kit with no paint, it is one of the cheapest things they've released at $325. Pretty great if you are talented enough to paint it. Rise Together released. This is a song done by Yafa X AI featuring Osworld. This is sick, dude. So whenever a MonsterVerse movie comes out in Japan, they release a J-pop song that ties into it, whether it be like Into the Deep for Godzilla vs. Kong or whatever the heck that one for Godzilla King of the Monsters is. Cannot remember. But what I do know is that this song is rad as hell, featuring Ifukube's music worked into it. It is just really interesting and really kick-ass. I think it's great. Toho released another re-edited version of the promo featuring featuring director Takashi Yamazaki hyping up Godzilla Kong: The New Empire's Japanese release, once again praising Mothra's inclusion in the film. I think it's very interesting that they're using Yamazaki to promote the New Empire, but you do you, Toho. A GXKX Agio food collaboration happened. What is that? Am I looking at a fish or a chicken or what is that? I don't know, but it was a little food thing that was released and it's got a cool box. Godzilla X Kong X Lords Mobile Phase 2 launched with this teaser poster, and nobody, I didn't see, maybe somebody did, but I didn't see anybody tell me what the Phase 1 collaboration of Godzilla X Kong X Lords Mobile was, but it features Godzilla skins and all sorts of stuff that was apparently cool, but nobody told me what it was, which makes me think probably not many people played it. One thing I know many people played was the Godzilla X Kong collaboration with Godzilla Battle Line. Oh my lord, I had so much fun with this. Godzilla Evolved is such a fun player piece to use. I use him all the time. He's in my team still. Kong with the Beast Glove and the axe is also an awesome addition. Taking the OG Jet Jaguar Singular Point and kind of modifying him, I think it's great. Scar King and Shimo were teased as well. Great pieces as well. Actually, Scar King gets on my nerves and Shimo's alright, but they eventually came out with a much better version of Scar King and Shimo in my opinion, but I'll talk about that some other day. I love Battle Line, so I wanted to shout it out. And that leads us to the box office reports, as Godzilla X Kong passes $546.9 million worldwide, becoming the #2 highest grossing film in the MonsterVerse. It also reached $190 million domestic in early May. A GXK digital release teaser was then dropped, and Godzilla X Kong officially released on digital on May 14th, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the MonsterVerse, a move which is very controversial because there's better ways to celebrate the MonsterVerse, like getting this film even higher at the box office. But I guess this movie eventually earned the status of highest grossing MonsterVerse film at the box office and subsequently highest grossing Godzilla film of all time. And so to some degree I understand why they weren't too concerned about keeping this thing in theaters, but it's also like, what a cooler headline it would have been if on the 10th anniversary of the MonsterVerse we got Godzilla Kong: The New Empire to surpass Godzilla 2014's domestic box office. Godzilla X Kong did drop from thousands of theaters, thousands, upon the digital release, suffering an enormous box office loss as a result, and eventually falling short of Godzilla 2014's domestic box office because of this. As for the week-by-week breakdowns, let's just pick up right where we left off. In week 6 of the box office, we're talking May 5th here, there was a very solid 38% drop, holding Godzilla Kong: The New Empire at number 5, which is very rare for a movie to hold on to the middle of the top 10 after 6 weeks of release, proving this movie's strength and proving that it had really solid legs to stand on. A24 followed this up by snagging Adam Wingard for the Onslaught horror film, while he was still the frontrunner to do Godzilla Kong 3. This eventually is the decision that made Adam Wingard leave the MonsterVerse, as he had to go do Onslaught instead of GXK3. Very interesting. I kind of think Adam Wingard may have just had enough Godzilla in his life and wanted a bit of a change, and Legendary didn't want to wait for him to come back, so it was like, alright, I think they're departing ways so he can do other projects that aren't Godzilla. And when you think about the fact that it's been nearly 10 years of him in the MonsterVerse behind the scenes working on these films, can you blame him? I don't know. Not really. Week 7 of Godzilla Kong's box office was May 13th, where the movie suffered a 44% drop, which is actually pretty large this late in the game. You want it to be in the 30s or lower, but overall it still had an amazing hold at number 5 in the box office because, again, there really was not that strong of competition around this time. GXK held on to the number 2 film global at this time at the box office, coming in under Dune 2 and landing at $558 million. Interestingly enough, the jump from Dune 1 to Dune 2's box office is quite large, in fact much more dramatic than the jump from Godzilla vs. Kong to Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, proving something I think is very interesting. Dune is a growing brand. The MonsterVerse, I think, is not. Dune jumped from $410 million to $700 million, nearly doubling its box office from the pandemic. Godzilla vs. Kong came in at $470 million, and GXK eventually landed at $571 million. That's only a $100 million jump. Dune 2 grew in audience. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, as I said in the last box office report, I don't think it technically did. I think this is technically a diminishing return, as Godzilla vs. Kong was estimated to have made anywhere from $600 million to $1 billion in a non-pandemic world. What I think this is important for is, because Godzilla and Kong are going to be teaming up again in the next MonsterVerse movie, diluting the brand and making Godzilla Kong team-up films no longer special. They're no longer event films. They're simply just the next MonsterVerse movie. I think these box office returns will be even smaller for the next movie, which I do think is a bit of a thing to worry about, as if the event films that are supposed to be the big box office boosts every once in a while become the standard and no longer boost the box office, how long can the franchise continue? That's why I think solo Godzilla and Kong movies are now more important than ever following up this next film. Otherwise, the MonsterVerse I do think is gonna have an end sooner rather than later. Anyways, week 8 we saw a very solid hold with a 35% drop and the movie coming in at number 8 at the box office as a couple new releases took the spot above it. Week 9 was kind of depressing. This is May 26th and Godzilla Kong the New Empire finally dropped out of the top 10 and was taken out of theaters in order to promote that digital release, stunting its performance overall. I've seen some people asking about the Japanese release, so let me address it quickly. GXK wound up underperforming in Japan from where estimates came in, but the movie still did pretty well. It was nearly 2 months delayed from the US release, and that's perceived to be a big reason on why it did not perform as well. It saw a decent box office performance, with Toho raking in a lot of money through Toho Cinemas. No need to share profits when you are the distributor yourself. The film wound up opening in the top 5 in the box office and was received well, but it was seen as a little too silly for a lot of Japanese fans, and Godzilla's new design was not embraced very well. Fans did, however, celebrate the things the movie did well, such as celebrating the kaiju and having wonderful action. It seems that the reason GXK was delayed in Japan was because -1 was still holding strong in theaters and they didn't want to kill -1 for GXK, which I don't blame them. Godzilla X Kong ended its box office run in theaters overall with 169 million domestic. We were so close! We were so close to 200 million. That's so sad, man. We were right there! That would have been a wonderful milestone to pass and would have been so exciting. But alas, we come in just short at 196 million domestic and 375 million international. 66% of the box office came from international viewers, which is really interesting because 71% of the box office for King of the Monsters was made up from international audiences, I think showing that Godzilla is a stronger brand internationally than here in America, whereas Kong is a stronger brand in America than internationally. It'll get even more interesting here in a second. It is important to note that Godzilla vs. Kong had 78% of its box office come from international audiences rather than here in America, but that's because we had limited theatrical capacity due to COVID, and many other countries did not. So that's why that happened. So that one kind of gets ignored. Godzilla 2014, I think, is still the most interesting case study here, as it holds the strongest domestic box office of the entire MonsterVerse, with nearly 40% of the box office coming from home audiences, and the movie topped $200.6 million here domestically. So again, we were so close to beating that with GXK, we just didn't hit it. I think there's two reasons for this. Number one is because it was the first Godzilla movie in 10 years, so it was like a big event that Godzilla was back in theaters. There was a lot of hype around what is this new incarnation of Godzilla gonna be? And number two, I do not think you can understate the power of having a lead star in the head of the movie. Bryan Cranston did so much heavy lifting for Godzilla 2014's box office, especially off the back of Breaking Bad. Kyle Chandler, Millie Bobby Brown, they're big stars, especially Millie Bobby Brown, but they're not the same type of star as Bryan Cranston. He appeals to the primary demographic of Godzilla. I think Kyle Chandler does as well. It's just that Kyle Chandler's not as big of a name. Millie Bobby Brown was trying to bring new audiences in, and she did a good job bringing new viewers into the MonsterVerse. Clearly, she wasn't appealing to the main demographic the MonsterVerse was already meant to appeal to, which is like men primarily, who are in the age group of 17 to 35, maybe even a little older. I really think the MonsterVerse needs bigger names moving forward. I do think that's important. I think that's another thing with Godzilla vs. Kong and New Empire. There's a lack of star power. In an event film like Godzilla and Kong teaming up, it should make so much more money than Kong Skull Island, and it barely did. Barely. GXK's total box office is 571.8 million, which surpasses Kong Skull Island's 569 million. But I think a big reason Kong Skull Island did so well is because it was the first King Kong movie in a while, but that star-studded cast, that A-list cast did so much work for that movie. I think we need to see more casting like what we saw with Kong Skull Island, where it's really exciting name brand actors, maybe not as many so the budget can be lower, but some really exciting name brand actors. I do think it's important moving forward. We need a Tom Hiddleston or a Bryan Cranston, you know what I mean? Or a Sam Jackson moving forward. On week 10, June 2nd, which I know this is a May update, but I want to jump forward just because it's interesting. GXK stood strong as the second highest opening weekend of all box office performers up till this point, second highest performer of the year, and it was still only one of 5 films to pass the century mark domestic in America. GXK dropped on iTunes this week, landing at number 5, a decent spot. Godzilla -1 opened at number 1 on iTunes, which was pretty awesome, alongside its Netflix release on June 1st. This led director Takashi Yamazaki to signing with CAA, the Creative Artists Agency, which will allow him to get US films, and this was considered a huge success for foreign films and for Godzilla, as he had 2 films in the top 5 on iTunes at the exact same time. Week 11, June 9th, saw Godzilla -1 land as the number 4 non-English speaking film on Netflix for the week, dropping to number 6 on iTunes, whereas GXK rose to number 3, once again proving Godzilla's strength and also a general really strong hold for Godzilla Kong over time as word of mouth spreads. Pretty cool. The GXK physical release release was revealed on June 11th for the 4K Blu-ray and DVD standard pack. Interestingly, it's the only MonsterVerse film I do not own on Blu-ray. I own it in the MonsterVerse 5 movie pack, so I actually don't own a Blu-ray for GXK. Finally, to celebrate Godzilla Kong's release in Japan, Adam Wingard was interviewed by a Japanese news outlet, and he discussed Godzilla's evolution. So to quickly run through that, he starts out talking about how much he learned from making Godzilla vs. Kong and how much he used from that experience to make Godzilla Kong the New Empire even better, especially as it relates to framing the kaiju. He feels he made major improvements on framing the kaiju and making them the main characters in New Empire, especially when compared to Godzilla vs. Kong. Wingard explains that he maintained the visual continuity for Godzilla and Kong in Godzilla vs. Kong because he was trying to make it the definitive Godzilla vs. Kong experience. But now that he gets to come back to the MonsterVerse, one of the very first decisions he made was to give Godzilla a brand new design and to make it a pretty intense redesign from the 2014 and 2019 designs. In order to do this, he tried really hard to find a way to justify his design through the story. It's interesting that we started with the design of Godzilla and then tried to find a way to justify it through the story, whereas I think a lot of the time it will come from like, well, we've got this story beat that's going to give Godzilla a new design, and how would the story influence Godzilla's design? I think that's kind of more or less what they did with like Godzilla -1, for instance. Wingard explains that the plan was for Godzilla to shed his skin originally so that it was a much more organic style of evolution. It was going to be a little more gruesome, but this idea was, unfortunately in my opinion, because I think that sounds awesome, scrapped as they went with a different story direction. Pink was explained once again to be picked because it's simply Adam Wingard's favorite color. That's the reason he wanted it to be on Godzilla. Adam Wingard's favorite colors are blue and pink, and so because Godzilla's already a blue creature, he wanted to shift Godzilla from one of his favorite colors to another. Wingard explains that he was really excited to update Godzilla's design in a very unique way that captures the absurdity and epicness of the Showa series visually. He celebrates all the fun moments in the Showa series that Godzilla had, from dancing to the tail slide, and he said he was worried that if he included something like Godzilla dancing in the New Empire as a reference to those movies, he would receive a lot of backlash. And so rather than doing that, which I think is the right call to maintain the integrity of Godzilla in the MonsterVerse, he decided to try and capture the absurdity of Godzilla in a grounded way through the design. That way it wasn't so obvious. He says his main goal was to make Godzilla Kong the New Empire feel like a 1980s animated film, but at the same time to make it feel grounded and realistic in a live action setting. In order to do this, he wanted to make a movie that borders on the balance between absurd and real. I really appreciate the restraint, although I do think like Godzilla's fighting in an anti-gravity field. He's launching off rocks. Wouldn't that have been a perfect time for him to strike the dance pose in such a normal, natural way? Kind of does, but for like one single frame. I would have liked him to like literally launch off the rock in that pose. I think that would have been fun. Plus, he's in the anti-gravity field. He could use his beam to kind of push himself around like in Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Maybe that's just me. I feel like there are small areas where they could have gone even further with the absurdity, and then there are other areas where I feel like they overplay their hand. I don't know. It's a really tricky thing to balance. Anyways, what are your thoughts on all of this? I think with Godzilla Kong the New Empire becoming the most successful film in the MonsterVerse, we're going to continue to see Godzilla and Kong team up, but I also think it's really telling that GXK didn't double its box office the way that Dune did, and it makes me nervous that the MonsterVerse, if they continue down the path of always having Godzilla and Kong team up, is going to kind of burn audiences out on seeing the two of them together, and so the next film won't make as much money unless it's like really different and gets people really hooked for a different reason. That's why I think star power is important. All right, anyways, you guys comment your thoughts down below. It's your turn now. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you in the first place. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining the channel as a channel member. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man out.